Well, here I am sitting down at my son's home, enjoying a Coke, which had become a symbol of freedom to me, which I'll explain a little later. I was born in what is now the Czech Republic in 1939, more specifically in August, and that would have been 1 month before Germany invaded Poland, which started World War II. So I grew up as a youngster through the period of World War II, not even knowing it, other than the events which made me realize that some terrible thing was going on. I was born in a city which is known as Pilsen, which is the German name for the actual Czech town, which is Plzeň. And we lived in an big apartment complex, several apartment buildings nearby. But anyway, back then, I remember a few of the things about traditions, such as the Christmas meal. In the U.S., we all think about Christmas turkey or Christmas ham, but the tradition in the old country is to have a carp for Christmas. I know carp is let's say an undesirable fish from all the fish that one can have and eat, but believe me, the way it is properly prepared and cleaned completely takes the taste out of the carp, and you have a wonderful fried fillet of fish. It's a treat for Christmas. And another tradition at Christmas, I remember this very well, never forget it, as a little guy. There was Christmas was always celebrated on Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day. And at night, there's a knock on the door just before I was going to go to bed, and a noise, stomping, and a noise which I found out after the door was open. There was a devil standing there, and the noise of stomping was the hoofs, like boots he was wearing, and he was rattling a chain, and he says to me, "Have you been a good boy?" And I didn't know what to say, but about that time an angel steps in and pushes the devil out of the way and says, "Yes, he's been a good boy." And then Santa Claus steps in and hands me a present. I thought that was pretty neat. Unfortunately, I may have ruined everything, because I remember a little while later going out to the street, looking through a window, and I saw the devil and the angel and the Santa Claus getting into a car, which I recognized was a vehicle that the people across in the same floor of our apartment complex owned. So that's an interesting thing.
What about other food? Other food that you ate?
Yeah, speaking of other foods, yes, in the U.S. we hear about soul foods. Well, believe me, I guess what you would call soul foods here, we actually had as traditional foods. What that really means is you would eat practically everything that was edible from a cow, for example. Okay, here we talk about steaks, and that's about all we eat from a cow. But there, you prepare lungs, you prepare brains, you prepare heart, the tongue, I mean, the bone marrow. And I'm talking about delicious foods. Liver, well, I guess liver, some people do eat liver, but like a lung cut up and cooked properly in like a sweet and sour sauce with potatoes, superb. As a kid, you never bothered what it was. It was excellent tasting food. Brains, unbelievable, scrambled with eggs. You wouldn't know how good that is until you try it. I mean, the tongue, a delicacy, very tender, no fat. It's just unbelievable. The soup you can make with bone marrow. You crack the bone. The bones were, at that time, given free when you bought meat at a store. The soup from bone marrow was just out of this world. Oxtail soup was another one that was very, very tasty. growing up, it was very strict growing up, and I'm kind of grateful because I think the early years of growing up determine what kind of a individual you're going to be in your later years. I remember one occasion that cured me out of wanting things when we were passing a candy store. My mom holding my hand, and I happened to see some nice candy, and I wanted some. And she basically said, "No, not now. You can't have it. It's not that good for you." And I started stomping my feet, and I got smacked on the side of my head. And believe me, that cured me instantly, and I never did that again. If I asked for something and I was told no, that was it. That was it. That was the end of it. It's interesting how we grew up with a strict guidance from our parents. Well, today, I wouldn't be surprised that if someone saw someone smack a kid, they might turn him in to the police for abusing a child. I mean, these things are totally ridiculous. You spank them in the butt, and they teach them a lesson. That's how they learn. That's how we learn. You think that did anything wrong to those growing up under such ruling? I don't think so. I remember one occasion back in the home country when my mom asked me to go out and get some milk. Of course, back then you went to the store with a big jug, and you brought your milk back. And I asked her if I could take my sled along because there was snow on the ground. And she says, "Yes, but you come home directly." Well, I got a spanking because I didn't come home directly. I went out, got the milk, and then went sledding. And I think I brought home a jug of frozen milk, and that's why I got a spanking. On another occasion, this was in nicer weather, probably like spring. A friend of mine and I went out, and I was still young. Remember, I left the country when I was 9, so there might have been 8 or 7 at the time. We walked by a lake which was being drained, and we noticed there were like leftover weapons laying in the mud, probably because of the retreating German forces. And I happened to see a big fish flip-flopping in a little shallow water, and it was close enough to the shore. I actually grabbed that fish and took it home. I didn't know what my mom was going to say, but she was very happy because we had a great dinner that night. In later years, I found out that the reason we were bombed, and it was at night, which I found out again later, was by the British bombers because they flew at night, whereas the American bombers flew during daylight hours. And the reason we were bombed was because these apartment buildings were not too far from where the big factory Skoda, S-K-O-D-A, which even today makes automobiles. Well, back then it was known for making huge propellers for ship-going ships, even though the country didn't have any ships as such, or a navy for that matter. But they also made all kinds of other implements and materials. And of course, when the Germans occupied what was then Czechoslovakia, the combination of the two countries, Czech and Slovak, they took over this big manufacturing plant of Skoda Works and had them produce war material for them. I learned that one of the weapons that the Germans used was a 37 millimeter cannon that was built in the Skoda Works near from where I lived. One of the things I will never forget was almost losing our lives during one of the evening bombing raids. The sirens went off, we all ran down the basement and wondering what's going to happen next. And we hear these woof, woof sounds from the distance approaching the building that we're in. And one apparently went off so close that the pressure blew the soot from the chimneys down in that connected to the basement, and we were all covered. We were all black, totally black, covered with the soot. that was a very scary event. I remember some days later going out and seeing these huge, circular, deep, round holes that the bombs made. One other event which I remember, not like to remember it, was I almost lost my life a second time when I went out for an afternoon to a nearby area near the apartments, and they had built these great big water tanks, which apparently would have been used by firefighters to fight any fires, and there was ice on them. And being a not knowing any better kid at that time, I decided to try walking on the ice, and I fell through. And I remember going down and then coming up and going down again and coming up again. And by that time, a man grabbed me. I don't know if I could have died there, but certainly could have. Anyway, I was saved. I was totally wet and cold, and he took me to my apartment, and my mom got all upset. But anyway, I got over that. So two times I could have been a goner. I look upon those events, and I feel that I am truly blessed to have survived that. To continue, as World War II were coming to an ending, I clearly recall seeing American tanks with the olive drab paint and white stars on them. That was pretty neat. I remember on one occasion one of the American soldiers visited our apartment. I imagine soldiers did this in many places that they went. They were very happy to have a home-cooked meal, and the soldier gave my mom a whole bunch of K rations, which are a treat to us, things that we never saw before. Memories. I'm sure that there are a lot of other things I could probably add later if I sat and thought about it more, but anyway, as World War II came to an end, we had moved to another city called Frankenbad, which is again a German name, and I guess this was popular in that the German given names were probably more widely known than the actual Czech name, where Frankenbad, Bad means a spa, and Franken means Frank. The actual name was Františkovi, which is Franks, Lázně, which means spa. So we lived there after World War II until about 1948. I don't know the exact month, but I think it might have been like October, November time frame. We managed to escape. My dad had his own car. He used it.